City Council, October 17, 2006, to order. Will you please stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance with us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Barnwell.
Here.
Falcone. Here. Horton.
Here.
House.
Here.
Schneider.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
Mayor Bloom.
Here. Are there changes to the agenda, Mr. Armstrong?
There are none, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Public comment. I have one slip, and it's from Jerry Davis. Turn on your microphone there.
Good afternoon. I'm here to do just a quick introduction of myself. I am the new Executive Director of Easy Lift Transportation, your special needs and ADA provider for Southern Santa Barbara County. I come to Easy Lift with over 25 years of transportation experience, 10 of those being in the private sector and 15 of those being in the public sector. Most recently as the General Manager and CEO of Mountain Area Regional Transit Authority. Being a native of Santa Barbara, it is good to come back home, and I'm excited to be the new Executive Director of Easy Lift, and I hope for a long, prosperous, and very productive relationship with the city. Thank you.
We wish the same as well. So it's very good. Congratulations. Committee assignment reports, committee assignment report. Am I flubbing up all over the place here? Ms. Schneider.
Thank you.
Sure.
Pleased to announce that about a half an hour ago, the County Board of Supervisors approved the countywide 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness with a vote of 5-0. So I was there, and they had a lunch break in the middle, and it was very great to see a lot of different departments come together, and the County Board of Supervisors realized how good the plan was. Edward Cabrera from the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness actually came down to speak to the board. I'm very grateful for his time to do that. What happens now, it's scheduling to go to the 5 different participating cities, and I believe it's coming to this city on October 31st. So we'll get the full report and update at that point.
Perfect. Okay. Mr. Horton.
Tomorrow morning at 7:30 in Santa Maria, the Housing Trust Fund is sponsoring a countywide meeting on workforce housing. And we're hoping to bring elements of the private sector, the public sector, and nonprofit sector together to work on this most important issue.
Okay. Good. Mr. House.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last week, now I'm going to forget the day of the week, there was a wonderful little event. This is on Thursday last week after school. It was held in a variety of places, but I was at the Cesar Chavez Charter School. It was called Lights On After School. We talked about it at the last meeting, but it was just fantastic to see the Franklin School kids and the Cesar Chavez School kids out there and being supported by city staff as well as by the volunteers from their own school, and just having a great time and doing fun after-school activities. And I wanted to just mention some of the folks who were there. Adrian Gutierrez, who is a police officer, was there on his own time and in uniform, and it was just really great for the little kids to have him to interact with. We had some of the in-uniform folks from our Parks and Recreation, our Parks Division, and we had the Endowment for Youth Committee, Arts Alive, Trader Joe's participated. Santa Barbara City Schools had folks there. Robin Zawoski from there. Let's see here. We had from our Parks and Rec department. Anita Ho was there. It was just pretty great. Wendy Uribe, Juanita Nava. I just pledged to read these names because I really appreciate folks coming out and putting that much time and effort into this kind of a program, and the kids sure did appreciate it. And then I had a chance on Monday. I'm not alone. I think 2 others, Helene and Das as well, to meet with some folks from the work training programs here in Santa Barbara. And it was just they were interested in knowing about how city government works and what we do here. And so they came over and we all got interviewed, and it's a great program. Allison Jansen was there. But they're supported by, supported jobs are provided for the work training program folks by organizations such as YMCA, Wolf and Associates, Elephant Bar, Santa Barbara Bank and Trust, the Housing Authority for the City, Santa Barbara Mental Health, and the Zoo. And it was, for me, it was once again kind of a reawakening to the value of all of our differences. and how great they are. So I really thank them for offering that to these folks to come by and see us, and just for waking us back up to that opportunity. They are looking to find other employers who would like to employ disabled people, and this program makes it possible and can make it a long-term success.
Good. Good. Mr. Barnwell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to let everybody know that there's going to be a meeting on Thursday at 5:30 p.m. at the Hope School to discuss, it's a workshop to discuss the outer/upper State Street transportation pedestrian plan that we've been involved in here. So again, that's Thursday at 5:30 p.m. at the Hope School. The Harbor Festival, for those of you who did not attend, the Harbor Festival was a rip-snorting success. Oh my God, they ran out of everything except enthusiasm. It was really great. They had lobster and crab, and I managed to take home a lobster and a crab, and we had quite a bit of drama in the kitchen with this one lobster who got away from me a little bit there, and they can actually move on land as well as in the water. And they're scary when they do because they are so out of context on a kitchen countertop. Last week, the mayor hosted, and I don't want to take too much of her wind out of her sails because she'll have some comments on the disability employment breakfast, which was really excellent, I thought, and an inspiring speaker. It motivated a group that I'm working with that's working on ADA and universal access issues for the general plan. So I think I'm going to put together a little meeting. Some of these people in our community who are supportive of disabled and people needing universal access would like to get that conversation a little more front and center for our 2030 general plan. You know, is it possible for us, for example, to have universal access showers in the bathroom, zero threshold sorts of things, and design them so that they're attractive rather than looking duddy like they do. So I will keep you posted on the goings-on on that one. And I think that's it. Thanks.
Okay. I might as well just, I wanted to thank Council members Barnwell and Schneider for coming to that breakfast. That was a good breakfast. It was put on by the Department of Rehabilitation, but it was called the Mayor's Breakfast, but they honored 10 businesses who have done some wonderful things, from a very small business to a very large business, and MTD received the top award, and well deserved too. So I thank the Department of Rehabilitation who put that on with my office too. But I thought it was really good. And we'll do it every year. We'll try to do it. October is Disability Awareness Month, so that's how it got in October. And then the Planning Department put on the Upper State Street Workshop last Saturday. It was very well attended, and it's going to be, again, Thursday, as you said, but very well attended, good suggestions, and I really enjoyed it as a kind of a alumni planner or something like that. It was just, it was very well done. The AIA architects helped facilitate the groups, which made a big difference. So I think Thursday is going to be another exciting one. This is a very well done study of Upper State Street. I'm very impressed. It's sort of a harbinger of our general plan update. It's really good. Mr. Williams, you have something?
Friday was the meeting of Beacon, where I serve as your representative and vice chair. And it turns out the Coastal Commission is desiring to turn over some of the funds that they receive as mitigation for seawalls that are repaired or constructed to Beacon, which is good because Beacon has lots of good ideas of how to help save the coast, but not very much money to do it. So that's a good development. Later on that day, Mayor Bloom and I attended the latest in the meetings of discussing TDR framework, transfer development rights to save Naples and the Gaviota Coast. And on Saturday, I participated in a Measure D forum, just sort of reminding people how many transportation projects, how many bus projects, and of course the potential of commuter rail, and that all these things are dependent on Measure D. Yesterday was a meeting of the Youth Council, and they're putting together a haunted house for Friday the 27th. So if you're a teen or a parent of a teen, I just want to remind you of that. That's traditionally at the Carrillo Rec Center. Mr. Barnwell, you can't go. You're not allowed. I also want to remind folks that the 10-year anniversary of the purchase of the Wilcox property and the establishment of the Douglas Family Preserve is coming up. Wow. And a lot of the local residents and park users have gotten together in the past year for restoration work. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't been up there lately, it'd be really great to see how well those native plants that have been planted that I helped plant are doing up there, and that, of course, those folks can always use more help, financial or sweat, for their restoration efforts.
That's great. Okay, consent calendar. Anybody have anything they want to take off? Items 1 to 9. Do we have anything to read, Lori? I don't think so. Okay.
Move consent.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. Wow. That just gets us to turn a page here. Report from the Ordinance Committee. Ms. Falcone?
The Ordinance Committee met today at 1 o'clock, and we discussed the unscheduled solid waste collection permits, which sounds fairly esoteric, but actually it's really important to our recycling endeavors here in the city. The ordinance needed a few tweaks, so we had a long discussion. We sent it back for those few tweaks. We'll see it again at the Ordinance Committee, and then hopefully we'll send it up to Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item number 10.
Donation of firefighting equipment to the fire department.
Oh, this is always fun. Chief Prince.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Bloom, members of council, Ron Prince, Fire Chief. For a change, I get to actually talk to you something about other than the Wildland Fire Plan, and it's fun to be able to do this today.
Don't worry, you'll have union MOUs coming up soon.
All righty then. But today we're asking the council to accept the donation of 3 thermal imaging cameras. These little devices are incredible, and I'll talk about them in just a minute. But really, this is an opportunity for us to acknowledge and thank the Santa Barbara Firefighters Alliance. This is a local nonprofit that has a very unique mission. Their mission is to help city and county firefighters by providing them with the state-of-the-art safety equipment and to really help us stay in a safe environment. And they really care about our welfare. And they've spent the last few years having fundraisers. And the last fundraiser they had was this past May, and they take the proceeds from those fundraisers and they buy equipment like this. Actually, earlier this year, you'll probably remember, they donated 2 of these thermal imaging cameras to the fire department. This time around, they're actually donating 3, and they're about $12,000 a piece. So today's donation represents almost $36,000 worth of equipment for us. And now every frontline truck in the city of Santa Barbara has one of these cameras, and we have the capacity now to see through smoke, to look into concealed spaces and see where the hot spots are, be much more efficient with our firefighting operations, and much safer, actually. So this technology is just incredible, and thanks to the Alliance, we've been able to accelerate our capacity to get into the 21st century, and our ability to use these and to actually see victims behind a cloud of smoke or see through walls, it's just really fascinating. So what I'd like to do is take a minute and just say how grateful we are to the Alliance. And actually today we have the organization's president, Kathy Cash, is here, and she'd like to say a couple of words to the City Council.
Okay, Kathy, would you like to come up to that microphone? We also have Pat McElroy, too.
Hi, I'm Kathy Cash, president of the Santa Barbara Firefighters Alliance. And again, we are a nonprofit, totally volunteer organization. And our purpose is to help supply the city and county and area firefighters with needed equipment that they don't have right now. I think one of the key things that we learned from Katrina is that there have been so many changes in technology which are just fabulous, such as these thermal imaging cameras, which save lives. And we've gotten phone calls from people who said, you know, my husband was saved because when the fire department showed up, they thought that no one could live through that car crash. And because they went back to the fire truck and they had a thermal imaging camera, they were able to tell that the man was still alive. So we understand that in the private sector that we need to partner with you. There are so many changes in technology. There's no way that our city and county firefighters' budgets are going to be able to keep up with them. So from the private sector, we understand that we need to partner with you. And our goal in the long run is to have a thermal imager camera on every area of fire trucks. So we're planning on, in the future, purchasing another 12 thermal imaging cameras for you. Okay, so we're here to help, and we're proud of the work that you're doing, but we understand that in order to make the infrastructure here in Santa Barbara a better place for all of us and for future generations, that we have to partner together to do it.
That's very great, and I thank you for your work. That's really wonderful. Pat McElroy wants to speak also, but we really appreciate the private sector stepping up like that.
Chief Prince obviously is speaking for the department. I just want to give a word on behalf of the Firefighters Association and let you know and let the Alliance know how much we appreciate the work that they do. And Kathy is here, and Linda Distenfield is here, and Mary Bonkin's here. And but there's so many people behind them, and that they do so much of the work in putting on this event that they do, and there's so many people in the community that support it. And we're the beneficiaries, not only the firefighters, but the city, and a lot of people that are going to be here after we're long gone are going to be benefiting from the work that they've done. And one of the things that they committed to this year is an upgrade of our training tower. And that not only helps city firefighters, but county firefighters and other agencies in the area that will come here and train. And so the improvements to the tower are going to benefit, like I said, not only our departments currently, but the people who will be coming in the future. So the work they're doing is invaluable. They're very, very receptive to the interests of firefighters and the fire administrations and what we can accomplish together. So I just want to give a big thank you on behalf of the firefighters of the City of Santa Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Falcone?
Thank you. I just wanted to publicly say that thank you to Linda Distenfield and Kathy Cash and Betty and Joey Stevens and Layla Khashoggi, who's one heck of an auctioneer. Boy, I've been to both years that it's been in existence. And I know last year, see, Ms. Cash is too modest to say, but I'll say it for her, they raised over $200,000 for equipment for the city and the county firefighters that we can't possibly begin to pay for some of these really cutting-edge technologies. We do the best we can, but because of you all and the people there, I mean, it's a mob scene. It's a party to go to. I tell you what, it's an amazing thing to see so many people give so generously, and the organization and the willingness and the energy that you folks all put to it is so really appreciated on behalf of our folks, because they're the ones putting their lives on the line. They're the ones who go out there every day. And I know Captain McElroy just spent about 18 days on the day fire, inhaling more smoke than any one body has a right to, and is actually not fully recovered from all of that, from what I understand. But we really owe a debt of gratitude to the men and women who put their lives on the line. And thank you all so very much for spending your time and your money in helping us to make them as safe as we can. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Horton?
I was just going to move that we accept the donation with gratitude.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Mr. Williams?
I just wanted to also thank you. It's in a world where it's impossible to get and purchase everything that we should. You make our job that much more possible, and just a personal thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oops.
I just want to say it sometime. I've always wanted to be able to see through walls. And so, since my first Superman comic book, I wanted to have X-ray vision. And so, be ready for like an unscheduled visit to the station, because I got to try that out. Thank you.
It is a very neat device. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? How could we vote no on that? Thank you so much. Thank you for coming, Ms. Cash and Mr. McElroy. Okay, item number 11, please.
Okay.
2006 City Charitable Giving Campaign.
Okay. Well, this is Chief Prince, too. Okay.
Yes, I'm still up as the
Okay.
Deputy Chair of the United Way Charitable Giving Campaign this year, Mayor and Council. We're pleased to give you just a brief report about the 2006 City Charitable Giving Campaign. And every year we spend about a month focusing on charitable giving. Actually, yesterday the campaign started, and it'll go through November 17th. And each year, city employees participate in this in a pretty aggressive way. Last year, 351 employees participated, and we generated almost $75,000 for local nonprofits. And we hope this year to increase the number of participants as well as the money that gets generated for United Way and their partners. This year, City Administrator Jim Armstrong is serving as the Community Campaign Chair, and Nancy Rapp is actually the chairperson for the city, and I'm the deputy. Unfortunately, Nancy was sick today, and so I get to fill in. But we have 23 representatives from all the different departments in the city that are going out and talking to their coworkers and trying to get them to, if not renew their pledge, start giving pledges and supporting this effort. What's exciting about this year is that we have the ability to do online pledging for the first time, and we're joining UCSB and Santa Barbara County in that effort, where we can actually go online either from work or home, and it takes about 90 seconds to actually do a pledge online. So it's pretty exciting. It makes it a lot easier for employees. We were going to do a demo today of that, but it's actually much more impressive if you just go to the city website and click on residents and then click on charitable giving, and all of a sudden you'll get a whole menu of things. You can walk through it, and literally it takes 90 seconds to do your pledge that way. So that's pretty fun for us this year. So in any case, we have a lot of partners in this. The United Way supports a lot of nonprofits. I think there's over 100 that are currently on the list, and we're excited to be involved in that this year. One of the things we did want to do, though, is also mention another activity that we participate in every year, and that's the Day of Caring. It's a countywide volunteer effort, and this year, it was actually September 16th, I believe. Over 70 employees participated in a Day of Caring, which was, we all donated about 4 hours of our time. And what I was told by a lot of the recipients of our work, that we did in about 4 hours, but it would take some of them weeks and weeks to do at their particular facilities. This year, we were at Harding Rec Center, at Harding Elementary School, the Art from Scrap, the Santa Barbara Zoo, and the Botanical Gardens. And the staff report says that I coordinated the effort, but actually my administrative assistant, Carol Lupo, did all the work. So I have to give credit where credit is due.
That's nice of you.
We do have a brief PowerPoint.
Remarkably refreshing.
We have a brief PowerPoint that Judith Cook from Parks and Rec has put together, and we'd like to just take a minute to walk you through that to show you how much fun we had volunteering on that day. Judith?
Thank you, Ron, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm Judith Cook, Recreation Manager from the Parks and Recreation Department. And as Ron said, I'm just going to give you some brief highlights of our wonderful work at the 15th Annual Day of Caring. As Ron mentioned, over 1,100 volunteers from across Santa Barbara County came together on September 16th to donate 4 hours of their time to projects to benefit local organizations and agencies. City employees have always been very generous with their time and have actively participated in the Day of Caring, and this year was no exception. Over 70 city employees, council members, family members, and friends participated in the event, and we were a good-sized group. As you can see there, we had 4 sites, and I'm just going to highlight briefly the projects that we completed that day. The day began with a kickoff breakfast at the George Page Youth Center and our own city administrator, Jim Armstrong. This year's community campaign chair was the Masters of Ceremony for the event. He even got the crowd inspired and energized with a Day of Caring chant. You can see him there on the drums, and sent us off all enthusiastic and ready to make a difference.
We want you to bring that to closed session next time, please.
29 city volunteers chose to spend the day working at the Santa Barbara Zoo, And these enthusiastic volunteers replaced railroad ties and pulled weeds at the site. And they even made props for the zoo's Halloween event, Boo at the Zoo. It was a really fun day there. Art for Scrap was another organization that we did some work at their facility. Art for Scrap takes materials that normally would be thrown away and then provides them to schools, school children and the public for art supplies. So our 4 city and volunteers did some general cleanup and organized all the art supplies there at the Art for Scrap facility. The Santa Barbara Botanic Garden also benefited from the hard work of our city volunteers. And there were 19 city employees, friends, and family members that did a great effort at the Botanic Garden. They pruned, mulched, and raked the gardens surrounding the historic Gain House on the site. And here's a picture of all the hardworking volunteers at the end of the day. I will say I heard from the Botanic Garden, and they were especially appreciative of all the hard work, but commented on what a wonderfully cheerful attitude this group had and how hardworking they were. And lastly, the Parks and Recreation Department was really thrilled to be chosen as a Day of Caring site for the 2nd year in a row. Last year we did an extensive work at the Ortega Park and the Ortega Park Welcome House. And this year our Harding Recreation Center was chosen. The city has leased this building from the Santa Barbara School District since 1981, and it's the home of our AOK, or After School Opportunities for Kids program, our after-school program that we do in collaboration with the school district, the Family Service Agency, the Police Activities Leagues, and Parks and Recreation. And about 100 children are served at this site every day, and it's very popular, has a very popular summer drop-in program there as well. And although the city renovated the building in 2003, it's had pretty heavy use in the last 3 years, so it really was in great need of some tender loving care. Our city volunteers picked up trash, trimmed trees, pulled weeds, and raked leaves all around the front of the building. This is an after picture. Actually, there was quite a change before and after. And re-landscaped the area with beautiful flowering plants and finished off all the flower beds with wood chips. It really looked nice and was such a great improvement. The interior of the recreation center, which is quite large, it was brightened up with a fresh coat of paint. And volunteers also cleaned the facility top to bottom and completed a number of minor repairs that day, including replacing a whole wall of garment hooks that the kids normally would use to hang their backpacks and jackets, but they'd all broken, so we replaced all those that day. It was a rewarding day for all who participated in the Day of Caring this year, as you could see by all the photographs. It was a lot of fun. And we'd like to take the opportunity to thank all the city employees and council members, their families and friends who participated in this Day of Caring and helped make it such a great success in Santa Barbara. It's really amazing what 70 pairs of hands can do in 4 hours and really can make a difference. So it was a great day.
Thank you very much, Judith. And that concludes our staff report.
Okay. Any questions? I appreciate you doing this. I don't think we have to vote on anything. We're just receiving this report.
Correct. Thank you, Mayor.
No, this is the first Day of Caring I missed because I was out of town, and I really did miss it. It's sort of funny. I enjoyed going and painting and cleaning and all that sort of thing. So next year, we'll do it. Okay, item number 12.
Introduction of ordinance for lease agreement with West Marine Products, Inc., including Recommendation B, that council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara approving a 5-year lease agreement with 2 5-year options with West Marine Products, Inc., commencing on November 23, 2006 for the 4,258 square foot retail location at 132C Harbor Way at a rate of $7,022 per month, subject to annual cost of living increases.
Okay. Mr. Redmond?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. Scott Reedman, Waterfront Business Manager. Just in terms of background on this lease, West Marine purchased the chandlery business from Bob Keating back in June of 2002 and assumed the lease through an assignment process at that time. The existing lease is one of the older leases that the Waterfront Department manages, dating back to 1983. And the lease expired this last September. The current base rent is $5,053 per month, or a percentage of gross sales, whichever is greater. And it's important to note that under this existing rent structure, West Marine has never broken into percentage rent and paid percentage rent. It's been strictly a base rent lease. The staff recommendation today is for a gross lease without a percentage rent clause, partially for that reason. Also, since West Marine has another much larger store within 1.5 miles of the harbor on Calle Cesar Chavez. There's a widely held perception down at the harbor that West Marine may not stock all of its high-end merchandise at the harbor location, and that they divert sales to the Calle Cesar Chavez location to avoid having to pay percentage rent on that merchandise. So we hope that removing the percentage rent clause will remove that disincentive to provide full line of service at the harbor store. The basic terms of the proposed lease are a 5-year agreement with 2 5-year options for a total possible term of 15 years at a gross rent of $7,022 per month, which is about $1.65 per square foot, and that's subject to annual cost of living adjustments based on the CPI. The proposed rent is in line with what was reviewed by the Harbor Commission and the Council in December of 2003 when the Chandlery remodel construction project was considered and approved. And just to put that rent figure into perspective, the average rent that the Chandlery business paid under its lease prior to West's acquisition was about $6,390 a month in the 4 years prior to West taking over the lease. So the proposed rent of $7,022 a month is greater than what this business or what this lease has historically generated. And as I mentioned in the beginning, West has never broken into the percentage rent, so they've been paying $5,053 a month since assuming the lease. So the proposed rent of $7,022 is significantly more than what's currently being paid. Finally, as part of this proposed lease, West will relinquish the second floor offices that it controls under the current lease. These offices are currently being advertised by the department through an RFP process, and we're confident we can lease these offices for $1,800 a month. The additional $1,800 per month on the second floor offices will be the icing on the cake, if you will. When combined with the ground floor space, that'll be approximately $8,800 per month instead of the current $5,053. And if my math is correct, that's a 74% increase in the rent that we're receiving from this property today. So that's a significant benefit to the department. And just to wrap up, the 5-year term with 2 5-year options for a possible 15-year term is a major commitment. It's a fairly long-term commitment for the department. However, West Marine did invest $200,000 to $215,000 in the space in terms of their flooring and their lighting and their fixtures and so forth. So it's justifiable due to the investment in the location. In terms of permitted uses, it's very important that we maintain a major boating supplies business in the harbor. And as I believe I've explained, the economics of the proposed lease represent a significant improvement over the existing situation. So that concludes my portion of the report. Unless there's anything, John, you would like to add, I'd open it up to questions from the council.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, members
yes,
of the council,
ahead,
just
Mr. Bradley.
one brief item that I know Scott didn't forget, but isn't really part of the lease. The other thing that you should take into consideration is that Bob Keating had control of this tenant space for many years. And as part of his chandlery business, he also operated a yacht brokerage from that same location. Based on better utilization of harbor space with the remodel and expansion of the chandlery building, Bob Keating has now moved out of this building and has moved his chandlery business into smaller offices adjacent in what we call the 125 building. That business generates substantial income to us on a percentage rent basis of his yacht brokerage. So we've actually also maintained that additional revenue, which used to all come from this building. So I think the better utilization of harbor space, not only for our West Marine, which is now all ground floor retail, the second floor offices, which as part of these negotiations were relinquished back to us, and Bob Keating staying in business only in the yacht brokerage, was kind of a win-win-win for everybody, and I think has worked out much better overall in the harbor area.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Horton?
My question is really more of a policy matter than with the specific lease, which I think is fine. It's the sort of thing I work with in my own personal business, and when we get out to a lease of this length, it begins to kind of cause me to think a little bit about changing conditions and the fact that the way this lease is written, it pretty much is a status quo lease with the adjustments that you've indicated here over the next 15 years. And the way that this community has changed in the 15 years prior to where it is now, it's hard for me to even project where we would be from this point to 15 years forward. And I would like to see us in the future, when we deal with leases of this length, to see if we can come up with some way of perhaps giving both parties a chance to step back and take a look at the situation, which may result in, say, 10 years out, if the circumstances are dramatically different. Because the way this is written, it's going to be pretty much the same for 15 years. And I'm not sure that's necessarily fair to either party. It's starting off at a pretty low level here compared to other leases that people are paying, and that's fine. You've explained why that is, and the fact that the tenant improvements are in there, and that's a good thing. As I say, I support the lease as it stands, but it'll be when it comes due for renewal, it's going to be long after I'm out of here. But I want us to think when we do leases of this nature about what the economic circumstances of the community might be 15 years out. See if we can come up with a way to address those issues. There are some ways that we could do that, and this one is pretty much of a standard lease form. And I just would like maybe for Mr. Armstrong to talk to me a little bit about that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No? Oh, Mr. Bartonwell, go ahead.
I kind of concur with that, and I'm not really sure. Have we gone outside of our own staff to a broker or appraiser or anybody like that and talked about these rent rates and this lease to verify they think it's sane?
Mr. Barnwell, no, actually, particular to this lease, we have not. And again, I think Scott and I are here today to tell you this is on the lower end of the spectrum. As you know, I was also involved in negotiating leases with Broadway and Nordstrom. And quite frankly, we gave away the store to Nordstrom and Broadway because the intent is for them to be the draw, not necessarily to pay revenue or to pay return. West Marine is for us an ocean-dependent use that we believe is important for us to provide. Could we generate more rent from this space? Absolutely, 100%. But it wouldn't be ocean-dependent use. It would probably be tourist-generated or tourist visitor serving. And it would probably be in the $250 per square foot, maybe a percentage of gross as part of that. So I could tell you that probably somebody would say this is not the highest and best use, is not the economic return that you could generate. We do very few base rent leases in the harbor or the wharf, as you know. We do a percentage of gross. So as the tenant does better, the city will generate that economic return. This is a very unique situation where we have a business that has a ancillary stores, so to speak, within blocks, half a mile of the harbor, and it is unique in that it really does act somewhat as a disincentive. We want the supplies and services in the harbor. We do not want complaints to you and to our department where people come up and go, I don't need to buy a t-shirt, I need to buy paint, I need to buy varnish. And that's what somewhat dictated this lease. In a best world, we probably say 10 years would have been the best that we should have offered. It was a tough negotiation with West Marine. After the fact, they put $250,000 almost into the building. They wanted a little more economic return. So within 5 years at 5% CPI, they'll be paying over $2.10 per square foot. After 15 years, you can do the math, it'll be substantially more, but they will still be focused and limited in what they provide in terms of services. So I think your point is well taken. Reopeners and leases are difficult. They're hard for both parties, but when we have unique circumstances, we certainly can look at that.
If I may, Madam Mayor, continue. Well, the reopeners is kind of what I was going toward. Also, we've got 2 5-year extensions or options, but we're not talking about really reopening anything at the end of any of those 5 years. And I also, without seeing the lease, to what degree can this be assigned? And the assignment, of course, has to be agreed upon by us if they are going to give it to someone else. But I wouldn't want to find ourselves in a position of where this assignment of this lease to a third party through a sublease would get benefit of these below market rates. And so I guess another question is, to what degree have we prevented that from happening? Because the reason, you see what I'm saying, right? The reason we're cutting them slack here is because we're considering basically an anchor tenant that's providing an awful lot of options for that whole center. But how are we protecting ourselves if they go out of business, if somebody else wants it, and is the lease assignable, et cetera?
Councilman Barnwell, yes, the lease is assignable, as most of our leases, if not all of them. The kicker or the approval process is that the next buyer or tenant that would be in there through that lease transfer would have to again provide the same supplies and services. They would not necessarily be able to change product or services. They would have to be, best example, go to Boaters World instead of, most likely that's going to be the type of tenant. So you'd be switching from West Marine to Boaters World, and they would have to do the same, and they would, if you will, benefit from the same lease terms under those situations. If they were to change the use, or if they were to modify the lease in any way, then of course it's all subject to renegotiation. Typically not something we will even then approve.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. And Lori, did you read B? Because it's by title only, I just forgot. Okay, good. And we're way further reading. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, very good. Thank you. Item 13.
Airline Terminal Project Revised Site Plan.
Okay. Airline terminal. Good. Okay, Ms. Ramsdale?
Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. Today we're here before you to ask your concurrence with the Airline Terminal Project Revised Site Plan. If you recall, last year we worked on completing a project criteria document which defines the scope of work of the terminal project and what can be achieved within the budget, and it represented about a 10% level of design. Council approved that document in December of 2005. With this proposed change in the site plan, the project criteria document will still remain the guiding document for the project, and the site plan is the only thing that's being changed in terms of guidance. In last spring, Council approved the selection of HNTB and local architects Phillips, Metch, Sweeney Moore as a design team for the project. HNTB's first task was to do a program review and a cost estimate update. Well, what they found was, in doing their cost estimate update, is that due to increased construction costs and a non-competitive bidding environment locally, that the costs were about $8 million over our budget. We met with HNTB and really went through the program trying to pull out things that we thought that we could do without or delay to another time to save money. We were able to come up with about $3 million worth of savings, which really is not enough to move forward with the project that we had. But the answer seemed to lie in designing a project that would not rely on a temporary terminal during construction, since that was a $8 million idea, coincidentally. So HNTB came to us with a alternative site plan that would eliminate the need for a temporary terminal. HNTB will be showing you not only the revised site plan, but some design elevations. And I want to emphasize that really what we're focusing on today is the site plan and its change, and design has quite a ways to go in terms of getting agreement amongst the design review boards, which is probably not a surprise to you. In your council report, there is a full review of all the commission comments that we received. Today I'll just do a summary. The commissions were basically had consensus in supporting the new site plan, felt that design was headed in the right direction. All of them felt that the composition of the design needed to be simplified. They liked the rotunda as a nice iconic element, and they felt that there was improved pedestrian and circulation, or pedestrian access and circulation, and they supported the landscaped areas that were in the design. Areas that are still up for discussion, as you read through the different committee or commission comments, you'll see we kind of had directly opposed comments in some cases. We need to work on the building's relationship to the historic terminal, the size, bulk, and scale, which has always been an issue of discussion, and architectural style. Our airline terminal design subcommittee, as you know, has representatives from each of the design review boards, Planning Commission and Airport Commission. And I do want to acknowledge them for the time and interest that they've devoted to this project, because it is outside their normal commission commitments. They felt that the emphasis, in addition to the comments that they were all in consensus on, they should emphasize the building entrances, just like the courthouse. Each entrance to the courthouse, which is quite a large building, has an emphasis, and you know where that entry is, and that's kind of what they were recommending. Also studying the long ridge line in the concept design. Airport Commission gave positive comments on the site plan. They felt that the scale and massing was better in the PCD design, and that the open air elements had been retained. The Transportation and Circulation Committee found the project consistent with the circulation element, and encouraged the airport department to work with MTD to provide service on the Terminal Loop Road. The Architectural Board of Review suggested that the courtyard between the historic terminal and the new building be enlarged, as well as the first floor viewing area, which is similar to the area that we have ramp site on the first or on the main floor of the terminal today. Also to break up the symmetry of the building. Historic Landmarks Commission found the linear building incongruous and disparate with the historic terminal. They also recommended simplifying the design and emphasizing the 1920s revival style. They felt that the rotunda fins may be too thin. I think ABR thought they were too short. So you can see those are examples where we're a little bit apart on design ideas. Planning Commission thought that the design revised design was a good solution. They asked to have us look at attaching the historic building to the new building, and they felt there was improved circulation and with better pedestrian access in the new site plan. Through September and October, we've been going through the commissions, and today we're here before you to get concurrence with the revised site plan. Through next February, the consultants will be working on the schematic design, and we'll be working with the Design Review Committee as well as the regular Design Review Commissions. And then following that will be the design, development, and permitting, and then construction starting in 2008. Now I'd like to turn over the presentation to Joe Grogan, who is the project manager for HNTB, and Fred Sweeney from Phillips Metch Sweeney Moore will also participate in the rest of this discussion.
Thank you. I'm Joe Grogan with HNTB, and we've been enjoying working with all of the committees and boards and commissions on this project, and integral is our working partner Fred Sweeney. When we approached the airport, as Karen says there's a budget problem, we were pleasantly surprised as we got into the program that we were able to actually come up with what everyone, I think, is a consensus opinion is a better plan for the new airport. And so what we want to do is start out, just refresh your memory with what the PCD plan looked like. You'll recall it was a new terminal built in the north is to the right on the site plan. It was a new terminal to the north built where the existing terminal operates today. So it required a temporary terminal to be constructed in order to build the new terminal. And it had the parking and for rental car and public parking to the south. And this is a picture of where the temporary terminal would have gone. But putting on our thinking caps with the airport staff, we came up with the concept of a terminal being built to the south of the existing terminal. This is what that plan looks like. This is what we're together asking your permission to proceed with. You'll notice the block of the rectangular shape there is the new terminal, and to the right is the footprint of the existing terminal. And to the east of the new terminal, you'll see the historic portion of the existing terminal, the 1942 portion, that would be moved from its existing location over to in front of the new terminal, and it serve as a portal, a gateway for many passengers entering the building would go through that structure. To kind of walk you around the site, orient you, the existing entrance to the airport today is to the east and around just about where the arrowhead is shown. The approach road coming in today, follow the path. We would have a new approach road that would have a curve to it, a new curb for private vehicles, and a new curb for commercial vehicles. So this new roadway curb where passengers load, unload, would serve the airport for the foreseeable future. It's designed for many years into the future. The area for parking, the short-term parking lot, would extend the full length of the terminal area, whereas before it was concentrated in the south side. The rental car parking is still located in the southern part of the terminal area. And then there's a loading dock area that would serve the new building that service vehicles can go in and out without backing up, so it's very safe and passenger friendly. To the northeast is the long-term parking lot, same as it is today. That would still be there. And you'll notice some pedestrian paths from long-term parking today to the new building, kind of a direct walkway for those using long-term. Also, the people using the short-term could use that on the north side. And then there's a central pedestrian walkway that connects with the MTD bus stop. And then there's another pedestrian walkway further south for the people at that end of the parking lot. So there's choices how you would enter the building. The building itself, well, let me talk about the aircraft parking before we leave the site plan. The aircraft parking mix is the same as it was in the PCD scheme, only it's oriented a little bit differently, so there's more apron area, more flexibility in how you park the airplanes, and in many cases the planes can be closer in so passengers don't have to walk as far. So that's just a review of all the advantages that the new scheme offers. Okay, let's go to the next. This is showing the first floor of the building superimposed on the site plan. Basically, the ticket counters are to the north side, and the baggage claim is to the south side, and the center of the building is circulation and where the meter greeters would wait for their parties. And Fred's going to walk us through the floor plans a little later and explain how all of that works. So let's go to the next slide, which is you skipped the first floor. Here's a little larger scale so you can see it a little better. The ticket counters in the new building are on the right-hand side. Behind those are the baggage, outbound baggage, and the carts that take the bags out to the planes. In the center is the area for the public to meet their arriving passengers who come through the central entry from the apron side. And then there's escalators, elevators up and down at that point that go to the second level. All departing passengers go up those escalators to the second floor. And then to the left on the drawing is the baggage claim and rental car facilities. The PCD had the rental cars in the old terminal, but we've moved them now into the new terminal so the old terminal can be used for alternative uses. Some of the committee members felt rental cars was not a good use of the old terminal. So the next level up is the second level of the building. This is where all departing passengers will go when they go up the escalators or elevator or stair. That's their vertical circulation zone there. They come up, they enter a queue, which is for the security checkpoint. There's 3 screening lanes. Once they're through there, they turn and enter the concourse. There's this long concourse with circulation, seating along the exterior wall, and the doors that open up to the stairs that go down to the apron and the future loading bridges. There will be one initial loading bridge affordable in the budget. It would be located where the arrow is shown so that a number of passengers can board their planes using the bridge. And then we have provisions for future bridges when the budget can afford it and when the airlines need those bridges. In the center of the second level, the green areas are the concession areas. It would be kind of an open concession plan, and this is just in general showing their zones. They may have curved shapes. That's a real design challenge to do that. And then there's an exterior observation area where passengers can go out and look at the airfield. Fred, would you like to talk about the architectural and view features of the plan?
Would you want to do that?
Well, so you don't have to come back to the floor plans.
Okay. Let's go back to the let's go to the elevations, and then I'll come back to that second floor. Madam Mayor, Council Fred Sweeney with Phillips Metz Sweeney Moore. I guess I'm supposed to say that. These sketches that you're about to see are basically just the first effort at concept ideas to present to the various boards that we've been to in the last couple of weeks so that we could get their comments, listen, try to read in what they're looking for, and then ultimately be able to go back to them and respond to all the comments and concerns that they have. So this is a quick sketch of the what we refer to the land side or the east side of the building, one would see from Moffett Place. This is a slide without the 1942 Edwards and Plunkett terminal in front of it. To the right is the ticketing area that Joe referred to on the plan. And on the left is the entry to the baggage area. One of the things we should note and shared with everyone is, like today, baggage will be out in the open. It will actually be fully covered, but it's not going to be conditioned space. The rental car will be conditioned space, but as we do today, we go to the baggage tents. You'll go into those portals where the arrow is and go to baggage retrieval. And then the center portion, where the staircase and escalator elements are and the main lobby, that's been a focus of considerable discussion, and we'll be continuing to review what that's going to look like. Next slide, please. And then this is that same view with the Edwards and Plunkett 1942 terminal in front of it. And you can see the challenge of a relatively low-scale, residential-scale building in front of a much larger structure, which we're dealing with. Next slide, please.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
May I ask a question? Just one.
Sure, go ahead.
Just in terms of scale, could
Yes.
you go back to that slide you had a moment ago? Am I correct that this is the top of
Yes.
the existing airport tower structure? That's the highest thing in the existing structure,
That's
right?
the highest thing in the existing
So the new
structure.
proposed building is
A little bit taller.
Yeah.
Taller.
It's about 6 feet higher, 6 or 7 feet high in this sketch.
All right, thank you.
And that sketch actually reflects the original drawings of Edwards and Plunkett that had actually a copper airport tower on the top. It doesn't reflect the sketch that the tower is today. And then this is a sketch of the air side, or to the west. So the rotunda that was referred to in the earlier comments is at the north end, allowing a panoramic view of the Santa Ynez Mountains and out towards the Goleta Slough, UCSB, et cetera. And then the windows on the second floor are all off of the passenger waiting areas and lounge areas. The center is the outdoor balcony looking over onto a lower terrace, much as we have today. But remember now, we're lifting the whole new construction about 2.5 feet up off of the current apron. So this represents a little higher structure. And then to the far right, you'll see a regional jet with a glass loading bridge, or an attempt to sketch a glass loading bridge at the south end of the terminal. Next slide, please. And then these are just a whole series of sketches that we did showing alternatives, and this one just happens to depict an alternative to the rental car element on the north side of the building versus the previous scheme. So lots of discussion back and forth about, yes, I like that, I don't like that. And we'll be continuing to do that before we do our formal first schematic visit to landmarks and ABR. That's an attempt now to study breaking the roof plane up, but also, more importantly, to bring natural daylight into the center of the building. One of the things that you all have talked about, and we certainly are embracing, is the fact we want to make this building as green as possible. So natural daylighting will be a big component of how we do that. We'll be obviously looking at materials. We'll be looking at all of those strategies one wants to use when we want to make a building sustainable. One of the challenges we're going to have is there's been some discussion about using photovoltaics to alleviate some of the cost of electricity. The state of the art now is actually very doable. We just did a community center in the small community of Oceano up in San Luis Obispo County, where we got PG&E in that case to give them a grant to do photovoltaics for the little gymnasium. It pays for 10% of the cost of that building. But the practicality is that takes up virtually the whole roof of that gym. It's the size of a junior high basketball court. So to get the square footages involved to really make photovoltaics pay may cause us to do much more study. So we'll look at all of those, both what I call passive green strategies and active green strategies. Passive is basically how we put the building on the ground, how we deal with architectural elements to shape windows, how we allow natural light in, and so forth. Active systems are like photovoltaics and the other things that you can invest in. And if we can go, I think we can go just to the north and south elevations very quickly, and then yes. So this is a north elevation study. You can see the jet on the air side, that rotunda with the windows looking to the north. And as we pointed out earlier, there's a whole series of discussions. Are the fins on the windows too thick, too thin? They're there because we have to shade for the west sun. As you know, the exposure, the way this building is oriented, is to the west, so that's our biggest challenge. There's lots of discussions about whether we should have towers or no towers, so we'll be going back and forth. But you can see the relationship of the 1942 terminal in the plan that we're now looking at in its relationship to the terminal on the right-hand side of this slide. Next slide, please. And then got up on a ladder just to kind of begin to simulate what the view might be out of those north windows at the rotunda, looking to these Santa Ynez Mountains. And I happened to do it on the day that the day fire debris was coming into our area, and so it's quite dusty that day. The top slide, looking over the roof, that's actually out of the tower door, looking back towards Goleta Beach. And that's the view we want to capture at the south end of the concourse on the second floor, looking through a large window. And a while back, Joe and I took a little stroll over to the Biltmore to look through that magic window in the lounge. And I said, Joe, that's the window. That's what we want. That's what we want to look south at. So those are the kinds of things we'll be doing over the next several weeks. We've got a lot more, as Karen pointed out, a lot more study. It's interesting to note that historically, Edwards and Plunkett who also did our Arlington Theater, The Tale Goes, designed it one night on the bureau of a hotel room before they presented it to Mr. Fox, and it got built in 6 months. We're going to do an airport, and we have a committee of about 50 people looking at it, and it's going to take us several months to get to the design. So, but this is Santa Barbara, and that's what we do, and we've been listening and try to be very patient and try to make sure we take in everybody's comments and accounts and hopefully come up with a design that will please all Santa Barbans. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes.
Thank you, Mr. Grover, Mr. Sweeney. And you're done. Okay. We have a couple of planning commissioners here, Ms. Jacobs, and we have Mr. Thompson in the back. If you want to say anything, we'll let the lady do the talking today. Huh? Okay.
Madam Chair and council members, the Planning Commission asked that at least one of us come forward and relay to you our unanimous approval of the plan for construction. And of course, you've heard the very well-represented concerns that the various commissions have had. The Planning Commission in particular was interested to see the next iteration of the design, how the historic building would relate to the new building in terms of size and function. And we also were very pleased with the green elements of the building, the continuation of our open space in the terminal. There's lots of it, and that's a good thing. And so we hope that you will approve this next step in the flight plan so that very soon we will be taxiing down the runway for takeoff.
There you go.
Thank you.
That's good. That's good. Yes, Ms.
Madam
Mayor.
Mayor, I do want to point out that Bill Lavoie and
Yes,
Fern
I have.
are here from Historic Landmarks, and Addison Thompson, from Planning Commission.
Right, right. Okay. Bill, Mr. Lavoie, did you want to say something? Come on up. He filled out a slip. Very fancy. It's been here before, yes. That's right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Here representing HLC's concerns, and I was also part of the subcommittee doing the work, preliminary work. When we were first presented with this new location for the terminal, it seemed a brilliant solution, a great way to save money without causing too much pain anywhere around. And so the subcommittee supported this direction. We realized early on, though, that one of the problems is when the building was shown to us in this new location, it was a big box, a really big box. One of the good things about the early design was it was a fragmented big box, and so as you moved around it, it wouldn't quite seem like such a huge building. The other part that I kept on asking, well, it seems to serve these 4 planes on the left really nicely with the bridges, but what about the 5 planes on the right, the ones I'm probably going to be using, flying in and out of here all the time? You know, I have to hike halfway back to Goleta to get to it, so I had asked for them to sort of like move the planes around so it looked like the airport was built for all of them, not just for the ones on the left side. The comments about the architecture, I didn't get to sit through ABR's discussion. I did sit through HLC's discussion and the subcommittee's discussion of the big box. And I think while on the face of it our comments seem to be coming from very different directions, I think it sort of speaks to the problem that's the next problem to solve as to how to make this box work. It's going to be a big building. There are ways of making big buildings work. We have several of them in town. The Arlington was mentioned. It's like a prime example of how you deal with a big building. You know, there are several. The Country Club in Montecito is another huge building, actually, but sits very poetically on that hillside. The Libero Theater was mentioned by Landmarks Commission. And it's when you're dealing with a big building like this, you can't just say it's going to be a big box and try to decorate it with frosting. It doesn't work. That's why the comments seem like they're all over the place. It was simplify the architecture, but compose the building. It really needs to be composed and broken up and not simplified so much as made into an artistic composition, and I think that's the direction I would hope you would send the architects off with. But to commend them for coming up with a brilliant solution for the budget. And if you look closely at the difference in the original plan and within the building itself, they have done a great job of really simplifying what goes on inside. So I'd recommend you'd send them forward, but with the caveat to really solve that problem of size. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for coming by. We have some comments from the council. Should we just start over here with Mr. Barnwell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Down. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I agree with everybody. It's really come a long ways from that first iteration that we looked at, and many compliments to the architect, et cetera. And I don't pretend to know all the conversations that have gone on before, so forgive me. I'm just kind of spouting a little bit. Can we look at the elevation, the one that shows the? I want to go back just a moment to Mr. Lavoie's, the one that actually puts the Plunkett building in the front. Yeah, to Mr. Lavoie's comments, and I'm not going to be specific here, except to say that it does look like a large, unbroken rectilinear mass, and I think it needs to feel smaller. When we looked at it from the north elevation, the tower of the existing Plunkett looked taller than it does here. This building now looks higher to me above the existing tower than it did when we were looking at elevation over here, and that kind of stuff happens all the time in these renderings, so I'm not going to worry about it. But if I'm looking correctly, and this is the roof of the Plunkett Tower, and that's the top of the little glassy area, then I got a feeling that's going to look pretty big. And the other thing about it is the putting the Plunkett building in the dead center middle of this creates a symmetry that, with few exceptions, Santa Barbara isn't really, this kind of architecture we do isn't always symmetrical. You know, when I look at the Arlington, for example, it's a very asymmetrical building, and you look at the courthouse, it's extremely asymmetrical in the way that it lays itself out. And there's something precisely Euclidean symmetrical about this that makes me wonder, does this have to be in the dead middle, or does it have to be half over here and half over there? There's something about that, just architecturally speaking. That'll be as far as I go on that. I just want to say I'm really pleased that we've come this far. I look forward to the future discussions. A comment was made to me by two architects in town that I think might be the watchword of where we're going, and I know you guys are the keeper of the flame, and I trust that you will do it, but the word romance in the architecture. And the romance, again, this isn't really a romantic building. And so however we get that romance, and I think the romance is something backing away from what makes it look so big and so boxy. But I really think you're on the right track. And I want to comment on the pedestrian pathways from the various land users that are going to walk in. I like the way that's delineated. The prior plans, pedestrians, I didn't have this good feeling about them getting through the sea of parking to the front door of the building. And I think you're on the right road on that one. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Well, I agree that this still needs some work. I don't know if my standards are quite as high as Mr. Barnwell's. I don't know if the design should make you immediately want to kiss your significant other, but it is an airport. But
it does now.
A big box is about a minimum of about 80,000 square feet, and this is 67,000, and it's the same shape, and we don't want something that's like a big box with Santa Barbara trim, though that may have some give and take with our highest priority, which I think has been on the council, which has been the desire for a highly rated LEED green building and a maximal use of solar PV on the roof. So I think how broken up it can be is a little bit restricted by that other practical consideration.
So what I definitely wouldn't want is a roof that we don't have solar PV on that is, flat and unbroken. So I know those are two things that you're going to have to balance, and for me, I think both can be accomplished, but the most important thing is for us to have a energy efficient building. And I have a question on that. Is the orientation, the straight north to south orientation is very uncommon as far as I've seen on large green buildings in the area. And so I'm wondering if that orientation is practical. I don't know everything about it. But if you look at all the green buildings on UCSB campus, they're oriented northwest to southeast, not north to south. And that is mostly to do with the way to capture natural light and natural heat. So I would, if you know the answer, please answer it, and if you don't, just consider it.
We
Yeah,
do
Mr. Gordon.
have the answer. The site is bounded by an airfield and by Fowler and Moffett. So it's a long rectangle with constraints on both sides. So, and we absolutely require a minimum depth for the aircraft to park. So what's happening is the envelope for the building is being defined by all the functional site constraints. And so our first preference would have been to orient it differently with respect to the sun, but we had absolutely no choice in the situation.
I guess I think that it's important to not frame the building around the parking and around the surrounding buildings. This is going to be the centerpiece of the new airport, and we should be framing everything else around it, and use the orientation that and shape that accomplishes both our most practical energy efficiency goal and our second aesthetic feel goals. I don't know completely how that's going to be accomplished, but a lot is being moved around already, and I think that you could do better than a straight north-south building that is so blockish and rectangular, and I just think this still needs some work.
Madam Mayor?
Oh, yes. Go ahead, Ms.
Councilmember
Ramsdale.
Williams? More than the parking shaping it, the airfield is a pretty fixed thing, and there's a certain setback that we have to have from the runways and taxiways, as well as that imaginary plane that comes, up into the airspace, of which the airplanes are not supposed to be penetrating that airspace. So there are a lot of technical things on that side of the picture that really narrows the sandbox that we have to play in. And not that we can't work on it, but I mean, that is more limiting than where the parking is.
Well, I'm not an architect, so I don't want to say exactly how to design this building, but for instance, if the existing terminal was moved over to one side of the new terminal as opposed to in the middle where you don't really even see it, it's totally lost there, and that's typical of when you take a historic building and put a new big building behind it, you don't even see it. And if you moved it to one side and then created, instead of a rectangular building but a V-shaped or a soft V-shaped building, you could do that without interfering with the airfield.
I guess what I was referring to is more the green aspect in getting the northeast, daylighting that you were looking for.
Well, my point is that you could get 2/3 of the building to orient the proper direction in that case, as opposed to 100% of it oriented in the wrong orientation. So I'm not saying that that's the definitive last word. I'm just saying that I think we could do better.
Okay, Ms. Schneider?
Thank you. The movement that this is going in, I appreciate in terms of what's already been talked about of the financial constraints we had and the budgetary issue, but also just in thinking about green building design and best use of resources, building a temporary terminal just to remove it doesn't seem very green to me at all. So it makes perfect sense to not just to ignore that component altogether. So not only is that a significant cost savings, but I think in terms of the best use of resources and building is being served here as well by having a new terminal being built and then leaving the older terminal. So I do appreciate that direction, and it's kind of funny you have to go through this whole process to get to something that seems so obvious, but that one seems obvious to me. I do have some questions on this particular issue, the design here, and again, I'm not going to go through too much detail, but the picture here, it does look like the roof is very steep, and I don't know if the pitch is very steep, or at least that's the image it shows for me anyway, and I don't know if there's a particular reason for that, but it seems like that attributes to the overall size of or the apparent size of the building. Is there a particular reason for that?
The roof pitch is at 3 and 12, and it's exactly what the courthouse roof pitches are.
Okay.
One of the issues at this early stage of concept design is we're working in elevation studies, and eventually, if you could go back to the watercolor sketch, the first, and so one of the challenges as we start to develop the design and present what this building's going to look like, that pitch is 3 and 12. That's exactly what the courthouse is. There is a wonderful book out on the courthouse that was published a couple of years ago, and in there's an aerial photograph of the courthouse. It's a massive amount of red tile if you stand up high and look at it. But we all look at it from the street, and you never see all that tile. So part of our challenge here as we begin to develop the design, and by the way, the latest things we've been working on this week have done away with all the towers. So we're continuing to work on it. But one of the challenges as we begin to present the images of what this airport looks like will be better understood as we start to move it into computerization, computer modeling, which is where it is now. These were really initial concept sketches just to get us to start to understand the order of magnitude of what we were challenged with. So please don't assume that these are anywhere close to the final. As we come back, and it's already changed in the last 2 weeks since we've done these sketches, it'll continue to mold itself. We're listening to all the comments. And as I said, already we're doing a scheme without all the towers have been taken off. We've done a whole bunch of things to the roof, et cetera. So we're starting to look at all of those issues as we come back. But the idea is we wanted to get something out there for everybody to make comments on, take that input, and then be able to come back to a design that really was reflective of everybody's concerns and issues. And we hear you quite loudly. It's a challenge to take what functionally needs to be a large building, needs to function to the air side, be able to get the jet bridges at the proper length to make the whole thing accessibility driven for people wanting to get into the airplane. So there's a lot of technical pieces that will come together in that whole process. So again, roof steep and so forth, we're looking at all those. But right now, those are at what we call a 3 and 12 pitch, which is the lowest pitch you can do and get tile on a roof by the code. So that's kind of how it's working. It just looks a little odd when you're looking at straight on.
Could have been that perspective.
In that perspective. And the reality is the only people who will actually ever see it that way are the guys in the offices at the sanitary district across the road.
Well, I appreciate that you're taking that into consideration.
Sure.
And because you look at that other rendering, and it does look like the historic building up front is really dwarfed by the other larger building in back, and we want to highlight that historical piece of the terminal. My other question, if you could go to the site plan of the second story. Yeah, thank you. First off, I echo what Mr. Lavoie was saying on the 5 planes to the right and feeling like should that be part of the terminal or not, or it feels like kind of separate from. I just, help me walk through this. A question I have, the budget calls for one jetway. Is that what we're calling it?
Yeah, the one on the left.
And the one on the left. The others then require you to go back down to the first floor to get onto the plane, correct? At least for in the near future, until we have jetways. How does someone, for example, who's using a wheelchair, get from the waiting area to the last, let's say they have to take a plane on the last one over on the right. how do they get on the plane after they go through security?
I'm going to walk you through probably 3 or 4 different ways of how people get onto the planes and how they get. As Mr. Grogan pointed out, everyone will come up the escalators and elevators off the main lobby. That gets you to what they call the secured area or sterile area on the second floor. So once you hit the main concourse, which is here, you're going to look to the right or left. You're going to see large windows both to the south and then, of course, out of the rotunda looking northwest. So as a passenger, let's assume you're a passenger in a wheelchair. If you're not using the loading bridge that would be located to the first loading bridge to the south, if you're using any of the other positions, the one immediately to the right, there's an elevator and a staircase right there. So if you're in a wheelchair, you would go down that elevator, you come out to the air side, and then load into the bridge just like we do today onto the plane. If you're going to if we go back to the site plan, please, where the airplanes are laid out. If you go to this plan, on the far north, if you go up by the rotunda, you can put the arrow by the rotunda, right near that rotunda, there's another set of escalators and another elevator.
Okay.
You would go down that elevator or escalator and come out a covered walkway to a point about right there. At that point, we will start making the transition from the 2.5 feet above down to the apron, and then you can see depicted on the sketch there the potential walkways to those planes. Now, mind you, the most easterly 2 positions of the airplane parking area will probably be used on a daily basis, least likely. That's really overnight parking. So the other planes that will be closer in will be on a daily basis. That distance is no longer than what we walk today. From the point we hit at the United Gates, as we go out the United Gates to that far plane when you load the jet to go to San Francisco in the morning, that distance is no longer than you go today. And I think we will, later on as we develop this a little bit more, one of the things I was suggesting is we actually come up with a diagram so everybody can see the walking distance today versus the walking distance in these. And you'll see there's very little different from what, if we walk the planes today, just like we do now, just like Mr. Lavoie mentioned, the distances aren't going to be much different than they are today.
Okay. Thank you. The accessibility issue is very important, I think, as we move forward, and I know we talked about that before.
Yeah, every inch of this terminal will be accessible in a variety of different ways, because one of the things, as you may know, is the handicap accessibility isn't just a building code, it's a civil rights law. And so we have to be able to accommodate every anticipated type of challenge one might have in terms of getting not only from your automobile or public transportation through the parking lots, walkways, into the buildings, up the second floors, and then out onto the airplane. So we're looking at a variety. We've had a lot of discussions with the airlines themselves about what they see in the future in terms of their ability to load for those planes that won't be using loading bridges or the loading bridges off the second floor. We're looking at all of those strategies, and I think they're going to continue to improve. And as new equipment brought in and new airplanes are brought in of different types, that'll just get better.
Great. And I don't think you mentioned on the second floor, but I'm assuming that there are restrooms and concession stands and all that good stuff.
There are
so
restrooms
unlike now when you're in the gate.
Concession stands, and yes, there are more ladies' restroom facilities than men's.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing this move forward. It's fascinating and exciting to see.
Okay, Mr. Horton.
I can't wait for the fly around, like your little seagull.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to some comments I had way back at the beginning on this thing. And coming from a transportation circulation standpoint, and this is the study I wanted up on the board anyway. It seems to me if we look out into the future, 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to be using more and more multimodal transportation and less people driving up in cars, hoping that we'll have a rail service, buses and things of that nature. Now, what troubles me a little bit is it seems to me that the access for public transportation is pretty far out there, and maybe that's the only way you can have it. But were we to, for example, to get a lot more rainy days 20, 30 years downstream, is that thing totally open, and is there any In other words, getting from where you would be dropped off all the way in, are there any moving sidewalks on that? Is there any shelter at all? Or, now let's go back to Ms. Schneider's standpoint. If you were in a wheelchair and you were dropped out there, that's a long ways in. Is there any provision for getting somebody actually up to the plane without having just to go through the elements?
I think what we're one of the things we're actually going to be spending a full day on tomorrow is that whole middle courtyard between the existing building and this whole positioning of the 1942 terminal with the big terminal. If you go to the private vehicle passenger, if you can put the arrow right in front of the terminal, from that point to the front door of the covered area of the terminal is about 25 feet. From that point onward, we're looking at strategies that you'll actually be completely undercover, to be able to go through the old terminal, directly into the new terminal, completely undercover, and then up into the second floor, and then with glass jet bridges, be able to go directly into the plane. So from the moment you're let off on your car, you can get in with a few feet into the terminal. Public transportation, which is on that outer lane, commercial, that would be hopefully at some point in the future, MTD would consider moving their bus stop into that point. Any other public multimodal kinds of activities in the future would go to that point. Certainly the taxis, hotel shuttles, so forth, will all go to there, but again, crossing over that relatively short area. In the long run, in the future, the terminal build-out, if it's expanded, will go to the south. So the area where the loading dock is shown today, that whole area, as we move, any future expansion of the terminal would go in that direction. So you can see its relationship now to the passenger drive area. And then there is some capability to go to the north in terms of expansion. So we've got a terminal that in the future can grow in each direction.
What is the drawing indicating at the far east? I thought that was a drop-off point for MTD passengers. Am I right there?
Yeah, that's the current location for MTD. As we say, we hope that in the future, if we have some further discussions with them, that they would be amenable to consider moving their stop right into the middle of the airport. But we haven't had those discussions yet.
It seems like we ought to.
Yeah, it's on our list of things to do.
Okay.
Madam
Yes,
Mayor,
Ms. Ramsey.
Councilmember Horton, actually, we have had several discussions with MTD, and they've done some kind of quick studies to see if a dedicated airport route would be financially cost-effective. And at this point, they've determined that it isn't, and they're not very supportive of coming into the Loop Road, because that ground transportation lane is basically for MTD. Because their normal passenger or their regular passengers that aren't coming to the airport then would have to come into the airport and be stuck in there instead of getting on to wherever they're going. And that's Route 11 that comes right by the airport. And there are some other issues with the bus in terms of carrying luggage on board and the timing of their schedules. So we have had those discussions with them, and I know that we will continue in the future to continue talking to them about it.
Yeah. Okay, Ms. Falcone?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Just refresh my memory, if you would, please. The cost of this endeavor is how much?
The total cost is $63 million, and that includes land side or the parking side, the building, and the aircraft parking
Right,
side.
that's why I didn't know what to call it, the whole kit and caboodle.
Right.
There you go. However, we're currently redoing, I don't want to say a new, but a certainly improved and location shifted runway, air landing, takeoff for the commercial jetways. How much is that?
That is...
The figure 80 million sticks in my head for some reason.
That is $37 million.
37, oh, well, I was way over. And that's going to be a fixed position from now until a very long time from now. And is the commercial, the private aircraft runway changing at all? No, so that's staying. So those are sort of fixed items that we have to deal with in the real world on the ground. I certainly appreciate Mr. Lavoie's request to compose, is I think the term he used, this building, and certainly to make it as green as possible and achieve as high a LEEDs standing as we possibly can. And now I'm going to ask my freaky flyer question, and that is, I know that HLC had a very difficult time with not only the solar panels, but the skylights that are on the Marburg big building that's downtown, and wrestled with that a great deal over a lot of time. Mr. Lavoie smiling. My question is that I think we need to be sensitive to that, but my freaky flyer question is there going to be any problem for pilots landing if there's a tremendous amount of glare coming off of something like that? See, this is the kind of stuff that goes through a freaky flyer's mind.
I noticed you said freaky flyer, not frequent flyer.
No, a freaky. Mr. Armstrong will attest.
As you're gripping the door.
Mm-hmm.
That will be one of the things that we'll be, looking out for in terms of design of the building, to make sure there isn't light glare or glare off of metals if there are already metals on the building, or
I know it's
from
an
the lighting
obscure sort of thing, and we want to maximize as much as we possibly can. I agree with that entirely, but this is Santa Barbara. We want to make it as beautiful and as historical as possible and as efficient and sustainable, but it's an airport, and safety is priority number one, at least for this freaky flyer, and I think for a lot of people. So while all of the other stuff is really wonderful, and I personally would love to see it all maximized as much as possible, I think we have to keep in mind that this is a safety issue, and federal regulations will dictate a lot of what we can and cannot do. So I think it's amazing. Thank you both so much for all of your work and your creativity, and I know that that building will be set apart from the main terminal, so on a two-dimensional rendering, it does look like it just mooshes right into the woodwork there, but it will, I think, be given the dignity and respect that it so much deserves. So thank you so much.
Okay, Mr. House.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. I have the privilege of being a liaison to the subcommittee that's been working on this design committee, and it's been quite interesting watching it progress. Just to the very most pertinent point, and that is that we're asked to concur with the revised project site plan for the airline terminal improvement project, and I do, and I hear a lot of support for the revision where we don't need to put a second or an interim terminal in, and how good that was in terms of giving us a fresh look. And this is a major gateway to Santa Barbara into the region. It is an airport. It's an airport terminal, and it's my general understanding of municipal structures that serve those kinds of grand purposes is that they should look like themselves. And I think that you're going to get a lot of input from lots of different places, and I'm hopeful that our design review boards will be helpful, and hopeful that they'll be helpful in ensuring that it still looks like an airport when we're all said and done, and not an imitation of something else. And I think you've heard some of those comments as we've gone along. The fact that the green aspects are being designed into it is something to be really commended, and save for, I think, what Mr. Williams mentions, the actual direct orientation of the physical structure itself. There may be many other opportunities which you're already beginning to explore. We know that in other places, large expanses of parking become great venues to host solar panels, and they are at angles, and they're not one great big surface that reflects in pilots' eyes and things, but they actually can become great, generators of a resource. There is more parking for short term in this. It does retain the long-term parking after the construction period is over. The circulation for pedestrians is greatly enhanced in this current design. There's much more surface area. I mentioned this I mentioned for those who didn't have a chance to be at the earlier committee meetings. This design allowed for a lot more surface area for disembarking and getting in and out of your car or your van pool, whatever. The commercial lane is much longer and there's much more surface area there. Just a lot of really great things here. And one of the things that was not mentioned, which to me was very important, was that on the inside of the second story of the new terminal, when you look back at the old historic terminal, you have a great big window that's meant to frame your view back at the historic terminal. It's really something. It's celebrated. It's like given a great perspective. And also on the first floor, without having to get your ticket and get up into the secure area, you and your family or those who are waiting for you can go out and still watch the airplanes come and go, just like we do now. So there's a whole bunch of really cool little things designed into it. And I do want to commend that there's a lot of emphasis on the experience of waiting for the plane, that when you're waiting you have great vistas in all directions that you possibly could that are just really remarkable. So I think that's pretty much it, and I just really am, it's fun to watch this process as it rolls along. I know it must be so frustrating for you because you're getting tugged and pulled in all directions, but I can't think of better guys that it could happen to.
You're not the first.
Okay, thank you. It looks really good. It's coming right along, and I commend you for it's in a very tight area, and you've done a lot of working with it already. It's really good. I'm just hoping, and I don't mean to be putting a damper on this, I just hope it's big enough I know it's big, but it's hard to look 50 years out there, and I know this building's going to last more than 10 years, so we just hope that it's big enough and comfortable enough that it'll last quite a while. I don't have a crystal ball or anything, but just the hope out there. So thank you. And do you need a motion for us to concur? I think we probably should have that motion.
I'll move that we
Mr.
concur with the current, or with this site plan that's proposed.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Mr. Williams, did you have something, or are you just ready to vote?
I think Mr. Barnwell and myself both have a procedural question.
Okay.
On design. Is this a final? Are you going to bring back another design, or is this it?
Oh no, this is just the beginning.
Okay. Okay, that's good. I mean, I'm comfortable voting for it if we're going to see it again. But I really think there's a couple things. First of all, there's plenty of PV panels that are not reflective surfaces. We think stereotypically of, those black PV Xylon-like, panels that look like something out of a science fiction novel, and there's so many other designs for PV these days. So I don't think that the reflection needs to be a factor, though the efficiency of the
Just bringing it up.
Okay, good. And then the second question is, because we were struck that there was no representatives from the city of Goleta here. Were they noticed about this meeting?
We went to their design review board in early December, and we will be making another trip to their design review board as well.
But did you let them know that this was coming before the council at this date?
Ms. Owens?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Williams, we did a presentation of the PCD site plan to the City Council back last December, as Karen mentioned. And we are scheduled to go to their design review board at the request of their council. We hope to take this revised site plan to you first and get concurrence on that, and then work with them through the process. As we indicated, we have a long way to go on architecture, and so we wanted to be a little bit more developed before we went back to them.
Okay.
Well, if concurrence means that I'm glad that we're not doing the temporary terminal, then I'm concurring.
That was the focus for today.
But here's another question. This isn't the current design of that road, right? This roadway. So we're moving things around over here, and it's hard for me to see why we can't have part of this terminal in the proper orientation for sunlight and natural heat.
all the light comes in from here in the first part of the day and from here in the latter part of the day. This orientation is really bad for catching that light. And I think in the age of global warming, energy efficiency, high energy costs, and pollution, we need to make that a priority. And for me, that orientation question and the sort of the high standard that I'll look for in green building and energy efficiency will really determine how far I can go. So I hope that's going to be worked on diligently.
Okay, we have a motion. Oops, Mr. Barnwell.
Yeah, I want to concur 100% with Mr. Williams' comments. In fact, I want to strongly do it. I had the distinct pleasure of working at a place called Arcosanti in Arizona, done by a guy named Paulo Solari, and it was all passive solar. He was a student of Frank Lloyd Wright. And the very first thing that they did was orient the buildings correctly to the sun. And I guess we just have to defer to Mr. Williams having a master's degree from Bren to have picked that point up. But I'd like to hear the argument as to why we can't do it, or why we can't do a portion, why the building can't bend in some way, either this way or that way. I think we mentioned this at the ordinance committee meeting, that the council came out 3 months ago very strongly that everything that comes in front of the city, every ordinance, every request, every permit, anything and everything has to pass through a matrix of sustainability and green. And the orientation of this building seems like an early on thing to consider when we're designing the building.
Mr. Sweeney? Oh, sorry. Let me turn on your microphone, then you can.
Sorry. I'd like to respond why we're struggling with the orientation and the challenge of the orientation of this building. First of all, on the land side, that's to the Moffett Field side, there is a security issue with our good folks that now watch our airports, and that's the 300-foot rule from a public road. So we've pushed that envelope from Moffett Road as far back as we can to stay out of the 300 feet, because once you enter the 300 feet, then you're restricted on the kind of construction you can do on a building as it approaches that 300 foot. In other words, you can use less windows, there's window impacts, it starts to raise the cost of the building, et cetera. So we've shoved that line back as far as we can. We're not at 300 feet, but we're at a negotiable point with the TSA. On the air side, we're restricted by the FAA, and someone mentioned that already, in terms of the distance from the taxiway. Also, functionally, we're restricted in order to get off those jet bridges from the 17 and a half feet we think the second floor will be into the 5-foot level of a regional jet. Those distances are restricted to the place we park planes. So that sets up that north-south line on the air side. That's why the terminal edge is sitting where it is, because of the restrictions to the air side. And then it's restricted on the land side by the 300-foot rule from the TSA. So one of the challenges in the previous PCD plan was the fact that the easterly end of the terminal was penetrating that 300-foot zone. And so it started to raise the cost of what the end of that building was going to, in terms of construction. So there's some technical challenges about how we orient this building. And I think it's been pointed out by several of you, in the ideal world, we would orient them very similar to the way we're doing it out at UCSB, the Bryn Hall, et cetera. Unfortunately, because of operational security and the practical sense of operating the airport, it's kind of shoving us into as Karen points out, a very narrow sandbox we can play in. But within that sandbox, we certainly want to look at all of those green and sustainable strategies that we can look at. One of the things that we've been talking about is if we can't do the photovoltaic on the roof, is can we, in fact, and Councilman House brought that up and we've talked about it, is can we do the orientation for photovoltaic on the rental car parking lot? Because it is, in fact, oriented in the right direction. So those are the kinds of alternatives we're going to have to look at as we're restricted by several circumstances on where the shape of that rectangle can be for a whole lot of reasons. And we'll continue to report back to you. because I know you're all very interested and concerned about that aspect of it. And as we begin to solve those challenges, we'll be able to come back to you and give you some rationale of why we can do what we can and why we can't do what we can't. And I understand we want to go for gold, so we want to be there for gold, so we'll continue to push that envelope as best we can.
Well, thank you very much for that. But I don't think I can emphasize strong enough. I would need to see the remaining building envelope that's left after you've shown on some schematic plan the setbacks from the flightway and from the road, et cetera, and see if there is any way within that building envelope in which to tweak the structure's orientation. And also, my respect for the HLC and the ABR, basically knows no bounds. However, I just conceptually right now, I don't have problems with putting on the back side here toward the technical side. I have no problems with putting a whole bunch of photovoltaic cells up there. And if we lost tile on that side, me personally, I don't mind it. I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but those are the kinds of concessions that I, as a councilman, am willing to make to get the building green. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second to concur. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for all the work. It looks great.
Madam Mayor, I
Okay,
wanted
item
to
14.
say one more little thing
Oh,
on that.
sure. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to thank, that's okay, it didn't have to do with the motion.
sorry.
I really do appreciate having the three-dimensional perspective drawing included in the presentation. I mentioned that before in our earlier meetings. It's extremely helpful for us lay people to be able to get a sense of its orientation and how it fits and all the rest of it. So if you can please keep doing that kind of stuff, it's really helpful. Thank you.
That's good. Okay, thank you. Item 14, please.
Conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation.
Okay, and I don't think we're going to have anything to report okay. So we'll adjourn from there. Thank you.